So this one's going to be kind of a long one, but we're going to go ahead and put some bookmarks down below for you so you can skip to the sections. We just wanted to show more so that you could kind of see the process, but it was much, much longer. We're a little better now. So for today's free upgrade, we're going to do high clearance links on the cheap / free for our new Bronco. Now you can do this for any of the other vehicles. You can do it for the C10, the JLU, for the same exact chassis, so no issues there. You can do it for the Deadbolt and the Gladiator, and the Betty, of course. But it's a pretty simple thing. You just have to be careful because you can ruin your links, but it's not that bad. You just need a block of wood and a hairdryer. Or a heat gun. I'd be very careful with the heat gun. You don't want to get it too hot. I've seen other people use heat guns and they bubble up or they melt the plastic, and they don't actually need to get that hot. You can see here we've already done one. So this is what a high clearance link looks like. When you put it on your vehicle, it's going to go in here like this. Okay, and you can see that it's going to give you a better, not an approach angle, but a better underneath clearance, so that when you're coming up over a rock ledge, your links basically, you're not lifting, right? If you have a straight link and the rock hits, you're going to lift up your wheels and you're going to lose traction. So this helps keep the wheels planted, right? If you get a little bit extra. Now, the idea is to try to keep the angle, the brake angle of the link about where your tire is, okay? So if you imagine your tire's here, your link's going to break right at kind of where your tire sits, okay? You want it to go up in and then come back down behind the tire, so that basically none of this portion, this front portion, is showing in front of the tire, because then that defeats the purpose. You want it to be straight into the tire, okay? So that's kind of what you're looking for as far as the angle is concerned. And you can look at my little diagram that's set up here, okay? And I recommend you do this when you do yours, and we'll go ahead and do it for the fronts here, just to kind of show you the whole process. So the idea here is, with a new link, you're gonna put it down, and when you heat these, they're going to want to contract, and well, especially when you bend it. When you bend it, you're going to shrink them. So you can't just heat them up and bend them. So you have to mount them. And you can see here, we've kept our same lengths, right? They're the same length. If I were to just heat this and bend it, you would lose a good amount of length, and that'll change your geometry, shorten your wheelbase, and actually cause your axles to twist, you know, with your pumpkin facing forward or down, depending on how you do it. If you shortened them, it would actually make your pumpkin twist this way. On both of them, they go in. So, and sometimes you may want that. Usually on the fronts, you kind of lift them upward, so you actually shorten the tops or lengthen the bottoms. That way your pumpkin turns, it's hard to show, but you go from this to a little bit like this. It gives you a different kind of steering angle as you're hitting rocks and stuff. So that's an option, but you'd have to shorten the top or lengthen the bottoms. But we're not going to mess with that right now. We're just going to get us some good high clearance links. So the first thing you want to do is pull out at least 2 of your links, so that you can get some of the screws, because the screws are how you're going to hold this in here. If you've got extra screws, you use your extra screws. You don't have to use these, but you want some longer screws so that they'll go into wood. You could also use a nail if you can find the right size nail to go in there. I just like to use a screw because I know it's the right size, and I can take it in and take it out without pulling on it real hard if it's a nail or whatever. And you're basically going to just pick a part of your wood. Well, here, we'll start with it. We'll just do a new one. You're going to set it down, and you can mark. I've got this kind of a pen with a long tip. If you don't, you don't have to do the drawing. I like to visualize, so I do. And I'm gonna go ahead and mark this, and I'm gonna mark this, okay? And that's gonna give me my 2 marks. And you can try to just screw these straight in, but it might be kind of rough. But basically just get these so they go straight in. And if you're having a hard time, you can also just use a Dremel to get your little pilot hole started. So now we have our 2 holes, and you can take your link and your screw, and you can go ahead and screw it into your wood. You want to make sure these are tight. You want to make sure it's pretty much all the way to the outside of your link eyelets. You don't want there to be too much play in there, ideally, and you don't want your screws to pull out, because you're going to be putting a lot of pressure on this. So if anything, you can try to kind of screw them in at a little bit of an angle to kind of make sure as you're tightening down. Just got a little bit of an angle on it, right? So that as it tightens down, it's gonna pull the link tighter, more tight. Okay, so our link is nice and tight in there. So now, as you see here, I basically got the bottom of the, well, yeah, the bottom side of the bend at the top of where the link would normally be. So we're gonna make the bottom right up in here. So we need to get a good angle. And let me just show you how I did this one, just so you can see. I basically just traced it, obviously. We just got a good trace on it. Okay. Then we just pull out one of the screws. Again, we're trying to be accurate here. That's why we're tracing it. And then we look at the angle and decide, what you're deciding is how much do you need, how much bend, where do you need your bend to be? And as I mentioned, you're kind of basing it off of your tires, right? So if we were to measure this, we want to get technical here, and you don't have to measure it. You can eyeball it really, because they're both going to be the same on your fronts, and then both going to be the same on the rears because you're using the same jig essentially. But if we're going to go from our center of our wheel to our hub, we could basically just do that same thing here, right? And we could say, okay, so we're going to be about there. So you want to put our bend right about here. And again, you want the top of the bottom of the bend to be the top of the link. So we're looking at, if we're going to bend it, we're looking at bending it probably right about here. Okay? Because that's our length, right? Right. So, and we're going to put a hole right there. Then we're going to draw. Okay. We'll go ahead and put our other screw back in. And again, this may seem like I'm overdoing it, but I like to be precise, especially when it comes to the links and the suspension geometry. Again, you don't have to be this precise. You could just bend away. But like I said, if you ruin them, they're not crazy expensive, but the idea is just that we're trying to do it free here. Having to buy new links just means you're spending money. So I'll use my tool to poke it in the hole here. This is what we're going to use to bend this up anyway. I'm going to mark it just so you can see, right? All right, and we'll get the bottom here. Now you can visualize what those links are going to look like. Go ahead and put our other screw back in. Now, the longer the screw, the better. You don't want these being too loose. So you definitely want to make sure you use, if you've got longer screws, go ahead and use those. Otherwise, make sure you're not stripping out the holes. This one actually, for some reason, seems like maybe it's just the wood. It doesn't feel like it's staying tight, so I'm going to opt for a longer screw. I'm going to pull this out. Now, these long screws come from the center point. The shorter ones come from up on the axle. So somehow we messed up our screw. I think we took this thing in and out too much, and it kind of stripped out our hole. And now we could just move this and make new holes, but I just had a safety pin sitting here. So I grabbed a safety pin and held it. Again, you want to make sure this is tight because we're going to be putting a lot of pressure on this thing when we start to push it up. So it needs to be tight. My safety pin's in there nice. You can use a nail, whatever. This is what I had. So we're gonna go forward with this and see how we do. You'll notice on this, I've got 2 screw holes there. And I actually, when you bend this up, you'll notice, and it's not as easy to see on the shorter ones, but on the long ones, as you bend it up, it actually bows, right? So you've got like a bowing happening because it's not going to bend at an angle. So what I'll do is I'm going to put screw holes here and here, and I'm going to put the two screws from the axles into there. So that way when I push this up against it, it'll help keep this flat. Okay. Because otherwise when you do it, you could end up with more of a rounded shape, and you don't want that. So these are going to help limit the top side, okay, as we push this forward. We're basically going to use our tool to try to push this forward and up and hook it into the hole that we put here. So as we heat it, we're just going to push it up and then try to hook into our hole and make sure that this stays down and this stays down as much as possible and get it to bend up there. Again, you don't want these twisting or turning or being able to pull in and shorten your links or twist the eyelets too much. A little bit of the eyelets twisting isn't a big deal. If these were just a little bit twisted, it's not crazy, but ideally you want it to be perfectly straight, obviously. You'd rather have it twist than shorten. Now, if it twists too much, you will bind. You'll start binding. So ideally you don't want to shorten or twist at all, right? So do your best to make sure that doesn't happen. I wouldn't stress on it too much as long as you've got your screws down tight and you're not lifting as you bend this upward. And as long as they're not shrinking, pulling inward as you bend this upward, you're going to be good. We're going to be using the wife's hair dryer. You can use a heat gun. Just don't get it too hot, okay? The hair dryer gets it warm enough and hot enough to be able to bend it easily. And then you let it cool. We'll put the hair dryer on just cold. You can blow just cold air, and we'll just blow it cold until it dries. Well, not dries, until it cools and hardens again. And one thing I like about this is I can direct the air specifically on that spot. If you're using a heat gun and you don't have more precise control, or you're getting it hotter than this really, you can use tin foil just around the eyelet here and around this part here, so that only this middle section is exposed, and the tin foil will block a lot of the heat. I think there's some other videos out there. One of the guys is using tin foil, but yeah, you can wrap this in tin foil a little bit, covered in tin foil, and it will greatly reduce the heat to the eyelets and the spots you don't want to heat. Now, again, we're not heating it up that much. I think those guys heat them up a lot more, and I don't think that's necessary. Clearly it's not, right? And they don't bubble up. They don't look melted. We like this method. And honestly, we kind of like the whole thing heating up because we want it to stretch, right? We want the thing to stretch out a little bit. And you can kind of just work it, right? You kind of form it and push down. You can see what I'm doing here. Just kind of push down on it. Hold this up here. Make sure that this stays tight as possible on the side. You're not pulling in. You don't want it to shrink in that way. And while we're just kind of working it here, we just let it cool. So then while we're holding it, we're gonna go ahead and switch to just blowing cold air and cool it down and make sure that it gets nice and hardened. So there we have it. You can compare this to the stock link. Okay. We are good to go. We've got a nice angle on it, so when we put this back in here, you'll be able to see that. So let's go ahead and put our two links, our front and rears that we did, back in, and I'll show you the difference. So you should be able to see a pretty good difference here. You can see our high clearance links. They're basically flat with the belly plate and the chassis compared to the links in the back here, which are much more raised, and you don't have the clearance, right? So that's the whole point, high clearance links. And you can see that our bend is right behind the tire, right? I wish I had a little bit better lighting there for you, but you pull these off. Okay, you can see the bend is right there. So one of the things to keep in mind when you're doing these links and trying to get the angle on them is you don't really want them to hit on your upper links. Now we are hitting a little on our front, just barely, but you'll end up limiting your articulation if you're hitting too much onto those links, the upper links, right? Our rears are also very, very close, but we're not. And if you're worried about that, you can go ahead. Now we can fully articulate. It's not preventing us anything here. If you are worried about that, you can always just drop the amount of angle you're putting in it. And instead of putting your basically hinge point above your previous, you can put it just barely down on the inside, right? Just a little bit. So you're not quite as extreme of an angle, okay? Again, it's about getting enough angle to be flat when your chassis, or with your chassis, right? But not so much that you're rubbing on your upper links. Another thing you can do is try to move your pivot point a little further forward. So on our fronts, for example, in hindsight, we maybe should have moved this just a little further forward. We were basing it kind of off of our previous one. We probably could have gone just a little bit more forward. That way this angle wasn't quite as extreme, but this one was. And we basically could have come out a little bit more. So this was a little more flat, and this was a little more extreme, and still kept the amount of difference. So basically move this point to here, and we would have seen more of a extreme angle on the front side and flatter here, which means our upper links would not have been as close, because this is the part that's hitting the upper links. Anyway, we're happy with what we've got. And again, it's just one of those things you've got to kind of, you can look at what I've done. I can measure this out for you. Let's go ahead and do that. And then you can adjust based on what you think you want. So from the eyelet to the bend point, we're looking at 38.5 millimeters for the rears, and basically 17.5. Hold on, let's look here. Yeah, I would say it's basically 17.5. .5 from center to center. If you're doing the center of this right here, not the whole. 40.5 and 18.5. Okay. And then here we're doing basically 32, maybe 32.5, and 17.5 again. You probably could do 16.5 here. Like I said, move this back a millimeter, this hole, and that'll give you a little bit more of an extreme angle on the front and less extreme angle on the back, and you'll be less likely to rub your upper links. So just so you have some of the measurements, at least for the Bronco. Again, I eyeballed it. You can, now that I've eyeballed it, you can make adjustments based on that. But again, we are very happy with the way this is coming out. Okay. We're going to go ahead and do the other side now. Alrighty, it's all done. Hopefully you can see that. And upon getting it all installed, we actually noticed that it's not actually touching the front links. It's very, very close. And you may not even be able to tell from here because of lighting. But our high clearances are just, I mean, maybe if we were to go up even higher than what we're doing right now, which we would be hitting then our body with our weights, and that's pretty extreme for this truck and what we're doing. It's not touching. You can actually see just a little bit of light through the link, and it's not actually touching. See that? So even when we go like that, there's just a little tiny hair. Anyway, the point is, that's just about perfect. I couldn't have actually, you wouldn't go any more. If you went more, then you would definitely be, but this is like the max. Same on the rear. You can see on our rear links. Again, on the camera, it may look like it is, but I assure you it is not. It is very, very close though. Anyway, the point is, look at how flat it is now, right? So that is a ton more clearance. And when we put our tires back on, right? Much better. So now when we try to hit some of those rocks, we're not going to get caught and lose traction because it's the rocks hitting and lifting. We're very happy with this mod. It takes a little bit of effort, but it's nothing crazy. And again, it's completely free outside of a block of wood and a hairdryer if you don't have one. Yeah, we're super happy. See, our wheelbase is still the exact same length. It's a beautiful thing, ladies and gentlemen. So we're gonna go ahead and get these wheels and tires back on, and we will probably go do some real world. We're not gonna do the control tests because this shouldn't really change much on the incline or down or side hilling. It's more about clearance, so we're gonna not do the control test this time. One of the things we noticed in the last video after we added the wheel weights, and we were pretty shocked to find out that our control test didn't seem to improve much on the side hilling at all. Almost in some ways it seems like it looked like it was the exact same, even with an extra 40 grams on the bottom in the wheels. We realized it's our tires. You've got no sidewall in the tires, and that's why you've got stuff like this, right? These are the slime balls from Flubber Stuffer. And there's other people that make these. Blaze Blade is also another one that makes these. But these help give rigidity on the side while allowing the front to conform over rocks, right? And so when you have no foams in these stock ones, the more weight you put on there, the more the tires are gonna fold and deform and flex. And when you're talking about side hilling, these just do this because they're heavier now. So you actually didn't gain a whole lot on the side hilling, but you saw a huge difference in the actual real world setup. So the weight is a big deal, but again, there's no real easy way to fix the side hilling unless you really lower your center of gravity even more without actually increasing weight too much, or you get better tire inserts, right? Which these have no inserts. So we may at some point try to figure out a way to fix these. I don't know if there's a good, cheap, creative solution to fix tires, but if you can think of anything, we're gonna do some research. But if you can think of anything, put it in the comments below, and maybe we'll try it. Maybe we'll open up the tires, and I wonder if you can do it without damaging them. I'm not sure, but we'll try to open up the tires, maybe, and see if we can do something. Some people put BBs in there. I don't think we're gonna go that far. That's not ideal for our stock motor, but if we can, I don't know what you could use. Trying to think of foams, different cheap or free foams, or I don't know. That's a rough one. Can you like glue? Can you put a layer of glue on the outside walls of your tires? Then you're not gonna have very much grip, but maybe it'll stiffen the walls. If you put like a super glue in there, what do you guys think? Super glue on the sidewalls, maybe not all the way to the outside, but just like maybe to here, right? Like, so super glue from here to here, just a thin coat might help stiffen it. That could be good. Maybe prevent some of this flex but then you're gonna be super gluing to your rim and potentially ruining your wheel. I don't know, it's an idea. I might try on some old stock ones, not these. I like these too much. And I have extras of these, so maybe. So another thing that we wanted to do was get some limb risers on here. So we've got some twisty ties, the stuff that comes on your bread or holds wires together. I don't know. We're gonna take some twisty ties, strip off the plastic, and we're gonna mount them. These front little, I don't know what you'd call them, but they're little plastic molded parts. You can see there's a real thin slit there. So you can actually, well, we're gonna hopefully be able to take this thin wire and put it through there, tie it off, and then bring it up to here. And we'll maybe drill a hole, right here, right in the front. You could also just wrap it around the back here. You don't have to drill a hole. We're gonna see what we come up with here. So we went ahead and stripped this out, got the plastic off. Now we just have a nice thin wire. And it's not like electrical wire, you know, they're kind of flimsy. This should be able to hold a decent shape, and it's thin, so that's good. And yeah, now we're just gonna see if we can get it to fit in there. We don't want to ruin it or bend it too much. That is a very thin slit, man. I don't know if you can see it, but it is very thin. So we're going to try to use our safety pin and see if we can widen this hole just enough. Just enough. Just a little bit of a lift there. There we go. Yeah. Okay. So now you can see it through there. So we're going to go ahead and use tweezers to try to wrap this around and make it a little tighter. You can also use pliers. We just want to keep the wire nice though. We don't want to bend up the wire too much. You also don't want to make it too tight and that it breaks the plastic here. So just be careful. You just want to make sure it's nice and wrapped on there just a tiny bit. You can straighten it out. Boom. That should work well. And then you can even Sharpie these black or paint them black. We might leave them silver. We like the silver and black and red. It's kind of our thing lately. I think we're going to drill the hole. I think we're going to put a hole in this. I don't want it dropped all the way down. So we're just going to put a nice little hole in the front. Make sure we clean up our hole. And we'll just go ahead and snip this a little bit off. You want to make sure you don't have the any sharp end pointing up, because it kind of defeats the purpose. You kind of want to make this as smooth as possible. That way your limbs aren't actually getting hooked on your wire here, if you're trying to be actually functional. You also want to try to make sure this stays nice and taut. You want to make sure it's tight. You really want to minimize the amount of play that can happen in this. You don't want it to be able to be pushed in real far. So the idea is like smooth. All right. Cool. Let's do the other side. All right, so we have some basically free limb risers now. Looks pretty cool. Just a little bit of extra aesthetic there, and they're semi-functional if you're actually out trailing and doing things of that nature. We can, I don't know, let's see what sharpieing looks like. Maybe we can blacken them up with a Sharpie, so they don't look so wire. Actually makes them hard to see, but that's okay. The detail. You'll see them when you really look. Just make sure you don't get your truck with the Sharpie. Okay. We like that. I think that looks good. I like it a lot. A little thin, but again, you don't want to be too thick because you'll end up breaking these little mounting points in the front, because they are very, very thin. Fantastic. So I think the next thing we're going to do is we're going to look at this glass, the windows and whatnot, and we're going to take this part, take the interior out, take it apart, and see what we're dealing with. We have not looked at it yet. We don't know what it's like in there, so let's see what we're dealing with here. So it's just these 2 front screws, and the whole thing just comes right out. There's no screws in the back. They're just kind of held in by pins. And just unscrew the front 2, and bam, we get our cowboy. So one thing we were considering, which kind of worries us now that we look at it, is we wanted to take out our front windows. That'll help lower our center of gravity a little bit and just lighten it up. But it does appear as though the glass is all one piece. Although this back portion here, this is good, is not solid. So really we should be able to just cut here and be able to get these front windows out without any, hopefully we don't lose too much. How's this front mounted? I don't know how the front's mounted on here. Looks like it's not really. So the concern is if we cut this, this is going to be loose. Worst case, we could glue it, right? We put a little bit of glue in here to hold that in. So we're going to go ahead and try to pop this glass out and see if we can cut out these side windows. We don't want to do all 4. We want to keep it kind of still looking stockish a little bit. But at least these side windows, that'll help lighten it up a little bit. I mean, maybe we can go do these back windows and just leave the windshield, the rear, and the 2 sides here and take out all 4, door windows, but I'm not sure yet. We'll start with the front 2. All right, so to pop this window piece out, you basically just kind of squeeze on the windows and work it out. It's just held in through pressure, and you put enough pressure on these front window piece here. It's kind of held in mostly right here in the corners. You can push this out, and same with the rear. There's no screws holding it in at all. It's just basically tight in there. Just be sure not to crack it, but it should just pop out. Okay. Well, it looks like there was a tiny little tab that broke off actually right there. So whoops, be careful. That might have been prevented if we pulled off this whole rear piece. I don't know if this just pops out. You probably have to unscrew here and here, and then you can pull this out, and this plastic piece here would come out. There's a little tab here. Maybe that's what it wouldn't come straight out, so it ended up breaking off that little piece there. We're not worried about it. But if you are, just maybe pull this whole rear assembly off, the whole thing, and then the rear will drop out a little easier by pushing in the rear window. You can just slide it down. Anyway, we got it out. So being that it's all pressure held, we definitely are going to have some issues if we cut this. It's not going to hold as tight. Again, we're not really worried about that. Worst case, we can use a little bit of glue and glue it in there. But we're going to take these front windows out for sure. These are just these clips here were just to help hold the wires that run up from the back. You can see them here. Just to keep holding them in place under the window and out of view. So we're gonna take these off. So we're going to try to stay as close to the window as possible so the windshield still can lock in. Okay, so it looks like we need to trim this out a little bit more so that it's not showing through the roof line, but I think it'll work well. I think it'll stick. So we're gonna just clean this up a little bit because it's a little messy right now, and we'll put her back in. So it's just like 3 grams, basically 3.5 grams worth of savings, but it's up high, so that helps. Plus, it makes it more like it's ours because we did more work on it. And that's a big part of this hobby, is customizing stuff and getting your hands dirty and making it yours. So we're pretty cleaned up here. Looks a lot nicer, a lot more clean. Shouldn't be able to see it through the body frame now. We can just snap it in. Make sure our rear's in nice and tight. I should be able to just slide these guys in here. All right, so it looks pretty good. Got it all in there. You can't see any of the cut marks or anything. Of course, the windshield is loose, but we didn't realize this at the beginning, but we realize it now. That's where the screws go. So it's fine. It's not going anywhere. It's gonna be nice and tight. Okay, so it gives it a little bit more of a scale look. We save a little bit of weight, but really it's about customizing it, making it ours, giving it just a little bit extra scale. I like it. You can take out all four if you want to save even more weight, and maybe we'll do that at some point, but right now we're just going to do this. So yeah, let's go ahead and show the footage of us running it on the rocks with our new high clearance links. And yeah, we're done for today. Hope you like these upgrades. All right, we got our high clearance links, and we also ended up moving our bumper back one notch. We didn't do that when we lifted it or raised the bumper up. So we went and moved it back just a little bit, gives a little bit better approach angle. We could go back one more, but then it lifts the body up too much. So this is about where we want it. Let's go ahead and run it. good though. It definitely gets through that back section better with the high clearance links. Let's go ahead and do right here. That's just a little too extreme for this guy, but seems to be doing well. Got a lot of battle scars popping up. Oof. Limb riser's a little loose. That's okay. That's what it's for, right? That's what it's for. Cool. So I know that was kind of long, but I hope it gave you some good ideas, and get out there and make some high clearance links. If you enjoyed this video, obviously share, like, and subscribe. That way you can see the next one that comes out. We got a whole bunch of different types of videos coming, not just the Broncos. So be sure to subscribe and hit the bell so you know when something new comes. Until next time, get out there and run your trucks, cars, airplanes, boats. If it's small and it's remote control, you need to run it.